We follow the insight that if you treat adults like adults, they'll learn better. That means class times and locations convenient to the student, not to the faculty member. It means expecting students to do extensive reading and writing on their own between weekly classes. Class nights that go for 4 hours at a crack, where the instructor does very little lecturing, but leads a seminar, a small group, linking the reading material to the student's work experience. Now, in the College for Professional Studies, we've got 10,500 students. Half are online, half are in classrooms up and down the Front Range. Half, cutting it a different way, are seeking a bachelor's degree, and half are seeking one of 9 master's degrees. These are in business fields and computing and teacher ed. Altogether, then, we have 15,000 students. In all 3 schools, the class sizes are very small, typically in the 12 to 18 range. So we can get done in the classroom the sort of mind-forming and value-forming education that makes for a Jesuit school. In a sense, the Regis education tries to equip people to do a better job of analysis and polite disagreement. A better job than we saw last week at last week's televised healthcare summit. I'd like to explore that angle of Regis's education with you a bit because it's where we have so much in common. Our goal is just what St. Ignatius, Old Iggy, we call him, the first Jesuit, started almost half a millennium ago, to leaven the human loaf through our graduates. At Regis, we believe that the people who make the biggest difference are those who know how to think and how to disagree in a thoughtful and firm but civil manner. Let me enlarge on that. All too many people today, when they come to us, have been raised up on Jerry Springer and the Capital Gang, who believe that the person who shouts the loudest is the winner, and that respectful discussion of points of disagreement is a waste of time. In comparison to the Capital Gang and Jerry Springer, the discussions last week at Blair House were the soul of civility. In our classrooms and our own conversations among faculty and staff, we want to model for our students and for each other the sort of respectful disagreement that makes it possible to learn from each other. And small classes make it easier to argue. This civility in disagreement is a big part of the educational goals at Regis. We want students to learn to live comfortably in secular society, but it's a society that's often ambiguous about its values, often without helpful answers to the questions of where do humans find meaning in their lives. And if you're a believer, a society that is often hostile to your own answers. In a sense, we're trying to take seriously what that Vatican II that I mentioned at the outset did in the Catholic Church. At that council 45 years ago, Catholic doctrine really didn't change in any significant way. But the language, the style of the council's documents changed radically. It went from giving commands to invitations. It used to be the sort of thing where the document would say, this is it, and if you don't agree, you are anathema. That's a technical language among Catholics for go to hell. When it went over to the invitational style, If you read their documents, it says often again and again, we invite our brothers and our sisters to consider these ways that the gospel applies to the modern world. The reason that the language, the style, changed was that the people in the pews had changed. In the 20th century, for the first time in the 2,000 years of the Catholic Church, the people in the pews had an education. They weren't typically the illiterate immigrants that formed Catholicism in the United States. So the change the council brought was a dramatic shift from a command Catholicism, that's the finger wagging, to an invitational Catholicism where the church respects the laity and depends on them to use their own brains, to use their education to think through church guidance and other wisdom and apply it to the world. So our job at Regis has two dimensions. We need to help students hone their talents by mind-stretching classes, whether it's in religion and philosophy or in literature and science. We do this kind of teaching so students are equipped to come to their own defensible conclusions on moral issues, starting with their understanding that the self-focused life is not worth living. That if you are serious about being a human being, and if you're a believer serious about serving God, you must see that self-sacrifice involved in serving the neighbor in need is the test of how real you are. And all that is what we mean when we say we teach people to think. Okay, so this is interesting, but what in the world does it have to do with Rotary? A lot. One major way Regis helps students explore the values they will choose to live by is service learning. By the tradition, or in the tradition of John Francis Regis, who realized that Christ is the ultimate center of life and who found Christ in the people on the margins, the outcasts of society, it's just taken for granted at Regis that everybody will get involved in serving the neighbor in need. There's tutoring for the poor, there's building and fixing up inner city houses, there's living in the barrio, there's going to Father Woody's Haven of Hope where you work with these homeless people from under the bridges. There's clinic work in Africa, in Central America, and on American Indian reservations. And all this is accompanied by reflective discussion about what it means to be a good citizen. What it means to be a person who lives the social justice teaching of his or her own religion. And we're not all Catholics at Regis, far from it. And therefore, the social justice tradition of Catholicism, of the different strands of Protestantism, of Judaism, of Islam. How do I live my faith? By the way I serve. But that's not enough for us, and it's not enough for Rotary. Sharing in the service of those in need means that our students with different religious backgrounds, different political suppositions, come to realize that they now have a shared understanding of how we have to live by taking care of our neighbor. And this understanding transcends and puts into perspective our religious and political backgrounds. So I begin to like the person who serves with me, even if I'm uncomfortable with some of the language he uses to explain his motives. I learned that neither he nor I has a completely satisfactory religious or political way to understand and express the obligation to serve that we both experience. I learned to not only treasure my language, but to appreciate his language and turn from his language and in learning from his language to learn to expand my understanding. We often continue to disagree, but now with respect and insight into the other's point of view. That's why we have